Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is, frankly, pretty terrifying. There is an invisible, catastrophic threat lurking right beneath India as we speak. Scientists across the globe are issuing massive warnings about an impending disaster that could strike without a single moment's notice. We are talking about the Great Himalayan Earthquake, an event so massive it threatens to completely collapse entire cities and systems overnight. If we want to keep ourselves and our families safe, we really need to understand exactly what this is, why it's happening, and the big question, whether we're actually prepared to survive it. Just take a look at this staggering number, 300 million. To put that into perspective, that's nearly the entire population of the United States. And that represents the 300 million lives across North India currently sitting directly in the crosshairs of this impending geological disaster. We aren't talking about a localized issue that's just going to affect a single town or state. The impact zone stretches across the entire region, from Delhi and Punjab to Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar. Millions of people, along with thousands of bridges, schools, and hospitals, are standing on ground that is silently but steadily weakening beneath them. And this brings us to the most urgent, high-stakes question of our time. When, not if, but when this 8.2 to 9.0 magnitude quake finally hits, will our society survive it? We have millions of people living in these high-risk zones, relying on infrastructure that honestly might not be able to withstand the immense forces of nature. The stakes have literally never been higher, and the clock is ticking. Which brings us to Section 1, the invisible underground threat. Okay, so here's what's actually happening right beneath our feet. We're seeing a relentless millimeter-by-millimeter collision between the Indian and Tibetan tectonic plates, the exact same forces that created the Himalayas in the first place. The Indian plate is essentially diving or subducting beneath the Tibetan plate at a rate of about 2 meters every century. But it's not exactly a smooth ride. In a lot of places, these massive plates get stuck. They lock together. But the pushing, that doesn't stop. That means a massive, inescapable amount of friction and tension is being silently generated deep underground. To really grasp what this means, scientists use something called the elastic rebound theory. But honestly, just think of it like a giant, incredibly thick rubber band. Imagine stretching that rubber band to its absolute breaking point. You keep pulling and pulling, and the tension keeps building. Eventually, that stored energy has to go somewhere, right? So it snaps. And that sudden, violent snap is exactly how this geological pressure is going to release, sending a devastating shockwave shooting right up to the surface. Now, this timeline is where things get really concerning. You probably remember the heartbreaking 2015 Nepal earthquake or the Bhuj back in 2001. Well, as horrific as they were, geologically speaking, those were just trailers. They released less than 1% of the accumulated tension. The last time a truly massive quake hit this specific Himalayan region was way back in 1505. That means we're currently sitting on a 500-year seismic gap. Over 5 centuries of trapped, unreleased tectonic energy is just sitting right under the Himalayas, waiting to break free. All right, let's move on to Section 2, the science of the ticking time bomb. When we're talking about an 8.5 to 9.0 magnitude earthquake, you have to understand that the ground doesn't just shake. The entire top layer of the Earth effectively slides. It unleashes an unfathomable amount of energy. To really put that into perspective, a quake of that size releases energy equivalent to detonating 32,000 nuclear bombs all at the exact same time. If a shockwave of this magnitude hits the densely populated Ganga Plains, the destruction would literally be comparable to an all-out war zone. And guys, the nightmare doesn't even end when the shaking stops. Enter GLOF, or Glacial Lake Outburst Floods. The Himalayas are packed with massive glacial lakes. A shockwave of this size will act as a huge trigger, literally bursting these lakes wide open. This means that immediately following the terrifying earthquake, devastating, unstoppable floods will rush down from the mountains. It hits the surviving populations with a completely deadly dual disaster. So with all that in mind, let's look at Section 3, India's infrastructure death trap. Let's take the capital, Delhi, for example. It sits right in seismic zone 4, which makes it highly vulnerable to strong tremors. Recent seismic simulations have projected a genuinely chilling scenario for the Delhi NCR region. If an 8.2 magnitude earthquake hits, over 500,000 buildings could collapse instantly. 500,000 buildings. We're talking about millions of people trapped in the rubble of their own homes in a matter of seconds. But honestly, this next statistic is the one that really keeps me up at night. A 2019 audit revealed a very dark truth about our preparedness. 70% of India's critical structures completely fail basic seismic safety norms. We aren't just talking about regular housing here. This includes hospitals, massive overbridges, schools, and large government complexes. The exact places people would run to for safety or medical help are structurally unsound, meaning they'd likely be the first to just collapse into dust. It all comes down to a fatal difference in mindset between two earthquake-prone regions. Over in Japan, seismic resilience is just a way of life. Primary school kids know exactly what to do because they run regular mass drills, and strict building codes are absolutely non-negotiable. And then there's India. We rely heavily on what you can really only call blind optimism. We have totally unchecked, illegal constructions, super narrow lanes tucked into densely packed colonies, and virtually zero real emergency awareness. We just kind of assume the worst won't happen to us. Which leads us to a very grim reality in Section 4, the nightmare aftermath scenario. The government is actually fully aware of the scale of this threat. A confidential report by the National Disaster Management Authority projects a horrifying 500,000 to 1 million deaths in just the first 48 hours alone if this great earthquake strikes. And let's be real here. Because our urban planning involves such narrow, congested streets, getting rescue vehicles in to conduct mass operations in the rubble, it's going to be logistically impossible. Because the immediate shaking, that's really just the beginning of the horror. Once the dust settles, a terrifying domino effect begins. Power grids and communication networks will be entirely wiped out. The roads needed for those rescue vehicles will have collapsed, leaving remote towns completely isolated. With no clean water and hospitals destroyed, deadly epidemics are going to skyrocket among the millions forced into makeshift refugee camps. Ultimately, all of this leads to a total breakdown of societal order, panic, starvation, and a huge spike in crime as sheer desperation takes over. Okay, take a breath. I know this sounds terrifying, but let's pivot in Section 5 to a 5-step survival plan. We are not completely helpless here. There is a clear 5-step blueprint that could save millions of lives if we start implementing it today. First up, retrofitting. The government has to partner with top structural experts to rigorously audit old buildings, fixing the weak ones and demolishing the unsafe ones, with zero room for corruption. Second, mass drills. We have to integrate earthquake survival training into every school, office, and neighborhood so people don't panic. Third, strict enforcement. Absolute zero tolerance for building code violations. Fourth, early warning. We need to deploy Japanese-style sensor networks in highly sensitive areas to buy people those crucial few seconds of warning. And fifth, maybe the most important, a mindset shift. We have got to stop relying on blind luck and start actively preparing. I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Nature and science have both sounded the alarm. The geological warning signs are literally all around us, and the tension beneath the Himalayas is peaking. So the question remains, are we going to continue crossing our fingers and relying on a broken system, or will we finally step up, take this seriously, and prepare before millions of lives become history in a single instant? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and let's keep learning and, more importantly, preparing together.